Have you ever heard about how diamonds are formed? They start out as nothing more than bits of carbon hidden deep within the earth. But over time, they are subjected to extreme pressures and temperatures until one day they emerge as one of the most valuable stones in the world. Now think about this for a moment. What if your childhood was exactly like this? What if those challenges, those pains, those moments when you felt different or out of place were actually a process of refinement? What if every difficult experience was part of a bigger plan, shaping you into something great? The truth is that nothing in the life of someone chosen by God happens by chance. But most people go through life without realizing this. They think that certain events are just coincidences or passing phases. However, in the Bible, God never chose someone without first preparing them. Consider Moses, who spent years in the desert before becoming the leader who would free an entire people. Consider Joseph, who had prophetic dreams as a child, but only understood their true meaning years later when he became governor of Egypt. Now stop for a moment and think. Have you ever felt like your childhood was different from other children? Maybe you went through difficulties that no one around you understood. Maybe you had dreams that seemed too real to be just imagination. Or perhaps you always felt that you carried a special sensitivity to perceive what others could not see. What if these were all signs? Signs that God was already working in your life from an early age. God's call has no age. Many people believe that God's calling only happens in adulthood, as if it were necessary to be of a certain age, a certain maturity, or even a position in the church to finally understand the divine purpose. But that's not true. God already knew who you would be before you were even born. The Bible says in Jeremiah 1:5, "Before I formed you in the womb, I already knew you. Before you were born, I separated you." This means that God not only knew of your existence before your birth, but He had already chosen you for a unique purpose. And do you know what that means? That those moments in your childhood that felt confusing, lonely, or difficult may not have been random. It could be that God was molding you for something special. If you've ever felt like your life never fit into normal patterns, you may have been called to something beyond the ordinary. People chosen by God often face challenges that others do not, because they are being prepared for something much greater. The importance of recognizing the signs. Now you might be wondering, how do I know if God chose me? How can I be sure that these moments from my childhood were part of His plan? That's exactly what we're going to talk about today. There are clear signs that show that God was already acting in your life since childhood. And throughout this video, we'll explore 5 such signs. The story of Samuel, when God calls in childhood. If you still have doubts about whether God can call someone from an early age, I want to quickly share a story from the Bible that proves it. The Bible says that Samuel was just a boy when he began to hear a voice calling his name during the night. At first, he thought it was Eli, the priest, calling him. But after hearing the same voice 3 times, Eli realized it was God speaking to Samuel. Then he instructed the boy to respond, "Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening." This happened when Samuel was still a child. God was already calling and preparing him from an early age to become one of the greatest prophets in history. Now think, how many times has God tried to call you, but you didn't realize? How many times have signs been placed in your life, but gone unnoticed because you didn't know you needed to pay attention to them? 1. Divine purpose. The truth about your calling. Have you ever asked yourself, why are you here? Not just in the physical sense, but in the purpose of your existence. Was everything you went through random, or was there a bigger plan for your life? The search for meaning is one of humanity's oldest questions. Since ancient civilizations, people have tried to understand the reason for their existence. Greek philosophers like Plato and Aristotle thought deeply about this, and spiritual leaders from different traditions taught that each person has a unique mission. But the Bible goes beyond any human thought when it states that God already knew your purpose before you were even born. In the book of Jeremiah 1:5, it is written, Before I formed you in the womb, I already knew you. Before you were born, I separated you. That's a powerful statement. It means that from the first moment of your existence, God already had a plan for your life. Nothing you experienced was by chance. But what does this mean in practice? How can you recognize this calling and understand why God chose you? Nothing is by chance. The formation of your purpose. To understand how God shapes someone's purpose, let's look at some stories from the Bible. All those God chose for great missions went through preparation processes from an early age. See the case of Joseph of Egypt. He was just a teenager when he began having dreams that seemed prophetic. Genesis 37:5-10. At first, even he didn't fully understand what they meant. His brothers, jealous, sold him into slavery. For years, Jose went through difficulties. He was unjustly arrested, falsely accused and forgotten. But in the end, he became governor of Egypt, saving thousands of people from starvation. If we just look at the beginning of Joseph's story, we might think that his life was ruined, but God was preparing him for something great. Likewise, many of us go through difficult times in childhood without understanding that we are actually being shaped for a greater purpose. Suffering is often part of God's process. Romans 5:3-4, it says, "Suffering produces perseverance, perseverance, character, and character, hope." If you face challenges from an early age, it may be that God was strengthening your faith and preparing you for something you didn't yet understand. God's purpose happens at the right time. One of the biggest mistakes people make is thinking they need to understand everything now, but God works in times different from ours. Look at the life of Moses. He was born in a time of oppression when the Hebrews were enslaved in Egypt. To survive, his mother had to place him in a basket in the Nile River, where he was found and raised by the Pharaoh's daughter. He grew up in the palace, but one day, upon seeing an Egyptian mistreating a Hebrew slave, he killed the attacker and fled into the desert. For 40 years, Moses lived in anonymity, taking care of sheep. He might have thought that God had forgotten him, but at the right time, God appeared in the burning bush and called him to free his people. Exodus 3. This teaches us something very important. Just because you don't understand your purpose now doesn't mean God isn't working on it. If you feel like you're lost or that your life has no direction, don't worry. God has already written your story, and when the time comes, He will reveal the next step to you. How to know what your purpose is? Perhaps at this point you are wondering, how can I be sure that God has a purpose for me? Here are some ways to recognize this. You feel like you've always been different. Ever since you were little, you perceived the world in a unique way. Maybe you've always felt like there was something special about your life, even if you didn't understand exactly what. You went through big challenges. Those who are called by God often face difficulties from an early age. This does not mean that God loves them any less, but that He is building a special strength in them. You have unique gifts and abilities. God does not call anyone without giving them the necessary tools. You may have a natural talent for something, whether it's teaching, leading, counseling, or helping others. You feel an inner desire to make a difference. People chosen by God feel within them a desire to impact the world around them. They don't conform to the ordinary and want something bigger. 2. What to do now? Now that you understand that God chose you from an early age, what to do with this information? Pray and ask for direction. Ask God to show you the next steps. He speaks through the Bible, other people, and even the circumstances around him. Be faithful in the small. Luke 16:10 says, "Whoever is faithful in a little will also be faithful in much." Don't wait for a big mission to start acting. Be responsible for what is already in your hands. Use your gifts to help others. God does not give us talents to keep for ourselves. If you have a gift, use it to serve your community, your church, and your family. Trust in God's timing. If you still don't understand your purpose completely, trust. Moses waited 40 years. Joseph suffered for more than a decade before his calling was fulfilled. God's timing is perfect. You were chosen. You realize that your life fits into these patterns. This is not a coincidence. God has a plan for you. He always has. You don't need to know all the details now. You just need to trust that each experience, each difficulty, and each talent are part of something much bigger. Now I want to invite you to write in the comments, "I accept God's purpose for my life." By doing this, you are not only confirming your faith, but also declaring to the world that you are ready for the calling God has for you. If this message touched your heart, subscribe to our channel so we can reach more people. 3. Resilience. The strength that God builds in you. Have you ever noticed how some materials are more resistant than others? Take, for example, steel. It goes through an intense heating and cooling process until it becomes strong enough to withstand great pressure. If it weren't for this process, it would remain fragile and useless. Now, think about your life. How many times have you been through difficult situations and felt like you were being tested to the extreme? What if these experiences, instead of being mere obstacles, were part of your training to become an unshakable person? This inner strength has a name: resilience. And God develops it in those He chooses for great purposes. What is resilience, and why is it essential? The word resilience comes from physics and refers to the ability of a material to return to its original state after being impacted. In the emotional and spiritual context, resilience is the ability to face difficulties, recover from them, and continue moving forward with even more strength. In the Bible, we see countless stories of people who went through difficult times, but instead of giving up, they allowed God to use these challenges to shape them. A great example is God. He lost everything: his possessions, his health, his family, but he remained steadfast in his faith. In the end, God restored his life, doubling everything he had lost. Job 42:10. Another example is David. Before becoming king, he spent years running from Saul, facing danger and betrayal. If David had given up halfway, he would never have fulfilled his destiny. But he understood that the difficulties were building in him the resilience necessary to rule Israel wisely. Resilience cannot be learned in comfort. Many people want an easy life without challenges, but true growth never happens in the comfort zone. God allows certain trials because He knows that each obstacle overcome strengthens our faith and character. Science also confirms this. Studies of American Psychological Association show that individuals who face challenges from an early age develop greater adaptability and emotional intelligence. These people learn to deal with failure and find creative solutions to complex problems. In spiritual life, resilience works in the same way. When we go through struggles and remain firm, we become stronger and more prepared for what God has for us. Romans 5:3-4 reminds us, suffering produces perseverance, perseverance character, and character hope. If you have ever experienced difficult times as a child, whether poverty, rejection, family difficulties, or emotional challenges, know that God can use these experiences to make you more prepared and empowered for your purpose. How to develop more resilience in your life? Now that we understand the importance of resilience, how can we cultivate it in our daily lives? 1. Get closer to God. Prayer and reading the Word strengthen your spirit and renew your strength in difficult times. 2. Learn from every experience. Instead of asking yourself, "Why is this happening to me?" ask, "What does God want to teach me through this?" 3. Surround yourself with people of faith. Walking with people who also have a firm faith can help you stay focused and not give up. 4. Don't fear failure. Falling is part of the journey. The important thing is to get up and keep going. If you want to be a strong and unshakable person, ask God to help you develop resilience. You are being shaped for something greater. Now that you understand that God uses difficulties to strengthen you, I want to invite you. Instead of complaining about the challenges, see them as preparation for the future. Nothing you went through was in vain. Every tear, every obstacle, every moment of uncertainty served to build in you a firmer faith and a stronger character. 4. You were never ordinary. Now that you know the signs, tell me, could you see yourself in any of them? Did any of these experiences resonate with your story? If yes, then here is the truth. You were never an ordinary person. From the beginning, God was already writing something special for your life. Everything you went through, every hardship, every moment of uncertainty, every internal struggle, it was all part of your training for something greater. And now you have a choice. Ignore this call or accept it. What happens when you accept your purpose? When you decide to live according to the purpose God has set for you, your life changes. You stop being guided by chance and start walking with a defined purpose. You stop looking at your pain as punishment and start seeing it as preparation. You understand that no matter what happens around you, God has already enabled you to overcome any obstacle. But here's a crucial point. God does not force anyone. He gives you free will to choose whether you will embrace this calling or not. Chosen people face difficulties because they are trained for big missions. The question is, are you willing to pay the price to live that purpose? The next steps, how to live God's calling. Knowing you've been chosen is just the first step. Now it's time to act. Here are 3 things you can start doing today to align your life with God's purpose. Stop asking yourself why and start asking what for. Many people waste time trying to understand because certain things happen to them, but that's not the right question. What really matters is, why did God allow me to go through this? What does He want to teach me? How can I use my story to help others? Don't wait to feel ready to act. If you think you can only live your purpose when you are 100% prepared, I have some news for you. That day will never come. Moses didn't feel ready. Jeremiah thought he was too young. Gideon saw himself as weak, but they all said yes to God and were transformed. If you recognize that God chose you, start now. Don't expect to have all the answers. Don't wait for circumstances to be perfect. Just take the first step. Surround yourself with the right people. The journey to live God's calling cannot be done alone. You need to be around people who strengthen you, encourage you, and help you grow spiritually. Stay away from those who constantly pull you away from God and seek connections that take you closer to Him. This will make all the difference. 5. The last warning. Not everyone will understand your call. Here's something you need to accept right now. Not everyone will understand your journey. Some people will doubt you. Others will try to demotivate you. Some will even laugh when you say that you feel like God has something big for your life. This happened with all the great leaders of the Bible. Joseph was called a dreamer and despised by his brothers. David was ridiculed when he said he could defeat Goliath. Jesus was rejected in the very city where he grew up. If you truly want to live the purpose God has for you, don't wait for anyone's approval. Just obey God and move on. The moment of decision. What are you going to do? Now, the most important question in this video, what are you going to do with this information? You can simply watch this video, find it interesting, and move on with your life as if nothing had happened. Or you can make a decision right now, accept that God chose you, and start acting in accordance with that calling. Remember, this is not an easy journey, but those who say yes to God live lives that are truly worth living. Now go and do what God has called you to do.